What's up, guys, and welcome to Manchester. I'm in a hotel room today because later on this morning I am going to be talking to a cybersecurity company about Formula One and about how Formula One teams use technology and their kind of rapid development rate to stay ahead of the curve and constantly look for advantages over the competition. That's me today. Then I get to head back home and enjoy the Mexican GP weekend, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. But I know lots of you will want to know or want to see the contents of this bag. Inside here is the finished product from yesterday's video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out by hitting that little white circle up in the corner up here somewhere. It is awesome, and at the end of this video I will show you exactly how it turned out. It's brilliant. You won't want to miss it. Anyway, Mexican GP. They're coming thick and fast now, aren't they? Another double header, which means for the teams it's been a tough week. These flyaway double headers, people are a long way from home. They've had a long season anyway. It's drawing to a close, and when you get a double header, it just puts extra strain on the personnel, the human element of that team. The logistics nowadays work absolutely smoothly. DHL do a great job. F1 FOM do a great job of moving things from one place to another efficiently, getting it all there. But the human element, that's what this tough schedule takes its toll on. So that's when you've got to have a strong team. You've got to have a team that's able to cope with tiredness, with stress, not be agitated by each other. Don't forget, you're a group of 60, 70 people travelling the world together, spending way more time together than you ever do with your closest family. And as with any human situation with a group of people, it can be easy to get irritated by each other at times under those stressful conditions. So you've got to find ways within your team to iron that out, to allow the team to breathe, to give them a little bit of downtime if you can, although that's very difficult, and just give them room to be themselves, give them space when they need it. And the best teams are the ones who are able to do that and keep the strength of the team strong right through to the very end. So that's one challenge. But the Mexican GP specifically provides a number of other challenges. We all keep hearing about altitude. This race is well over 2,000 metres above sea level, 2,200, 2,300. It's high. How does the altitude affect these cars and the race? Well, it has some fairly significant effects on both the cars and on the people. It's a really strange place when you get there and you suddenly forget where you are, because of course looking around you, you're just in a city. It doesn't look any different until you start to walk up a flight of stairs. At the track, you'll run up the stairs to the media centre, for example, or run up the stairs to your hotel room back at the hotel, and all of a sudden you're out of breath. You feel knackered. You feel like you've just run a half marathon and you've only run up a flight or two of stairs, and you're suddenly thinking to yourself, am I unfit? What's happened here? It's the altitude. The air is thin. The oxygen levels are low at that altitude, and with us humans, we need to take in as much oxygen as we can to fill our lungs, to keep us breathing normally. When you can't get enough oxygen into your lungs, you suddenly start to pant and feel a little bit out of breath. That's one of the effects. So that affects the team all weekend, because the pit stop crew, for example, bursting out of the garage into these highly intense couple of seconds, albeit long pit stops, that burst of energy can take your breath away. And it sounds trivial, but it's not. And of course the drivers in the cars are under intense physical strain for the whole kind of close to 2 hour long race. Under those conditions can be very, very tough. So the human side takes a hit, but so does the technical side. The cars are punished around here. They behave very differently. This is a track that, look, first of all, it's a track that has overtaking opportunities. So when we come to the race spectacle, we can get good races here. 71 laps around a track that's not one of the longest. It has a very long DRS straight. It has two DRS straights, but one particularly very long one. Has that incredibly tight, twisty section that goes through the stadium where the crowd are looking down and bearing down on the cars. It has a lot going for it, this track. But the fact that the altitude kicks in has a number of effects. And the one we hear about most, of course, is the lack of downforce. uniquely because the air is so thin at well over 2,000 metres above sea level. To achieve the levels of downforce that you need for this particular track, the teams have to put on pretty much everything. Maximum downforce levels, huge big front and rear wings on the cars, to try and achieve the max. Now if you put those downforce levels on like you do at Monaco, at Singapore, you achieve maximum downforce on the car. You know, the airflow rushing over the car pushes the car down onto the surface of the tarmac, gives it incredible levels of grip. Here, at this particular racetrack, you put maximum aero levels onto the car, but because the air's so thin, you get less downforce than you do at Monza, where you have these tiny little skinny wings on the car. So the effect is dramatic. Essentially, what you're doing to create downforce through aerodynamics is you're using the high velocity airflow rushing over and around the surfaces of the car. All that airflow, which is a huge amount, huge mass of airflow rushing past at great speed, to push down on those aerodynamic surfaces and force the car into the surface of the tarmac, as I say. If there's less air, because there is, the air is thinner, if there's less air flowing over the car, doesn't matter how fast you're going, doesn't matter how big the aerodynamic surfaces are, there is just simply less air to push the car down, and therefore you get less aerodynamic downforce and less grip. The drivers always talk about this being a very low grip race. The racetrack surface itself is relatively smooth and low grip, combined with what will be low downforce effect in the end, means that the cars can be very slippery, or the racetrack can be very slippery, and it's a low grip race. Incredibly high speed as well, because that lower downforce level equally means there's lower drag on the car. Even though you've got huge wings on, the drag effect is much less because there is less air, or less air resistance, slowing the car down. So at the end of that very long start-finish straight going down towards turn 1, the cars will achieve their highest maximum speed of the season, over 220 miles an hour. A great place for overtakes using DRS down that long straight into turn 1. If you get a good exit out of the last corner, using DRS particularly, but even without DRS, you get this huge long period to slingshot past your rivals. So overtaking is definitely possible here. So drag is affected, downforce is affected. The engine, the internal combustion engine, of course, has less oxygen in the air to combust. You know, we want as much oxygen forced into that internal combustion engine as possible to aid the combustion process and therefore deliver as much power as we can. And with thinner air and less oxygen, the engine just can't produce as much power as it normally would do. So that's another effect. To try and compensate for some of that, of course, the turbo has to try and force more air into the top of that engine, and that means the turbo has to run harder and faster. The turbo can be operating 10% faster. That could mean up to 10,000 revolutions per minute faster than it normally would. They already run at over 100,000 RPM, these turbos, incredibly fast. So they're having to work even faster to push that air through the engine, and that can put an amazing amount of strain on some of the load-bearing parts. The bearings in a turbo, in a modern turbo, I mean, have to sustain incredible forces anyway. At this particular racetrack, you need a bulletproof turbo unit on your internal combustion engine, and the ones who don't will be found out. So that's the other effect, internal combustion engine and turbo. And the other one is cooling, again because the air is thinner and having less of it to force through the sort of cooling areas of the car, to force through the air intakes in the side pods and the overhead air intake. You have, and the brakes as well, of course, you have less airflow rushing past those areas of the car to cool them, and therefore cooling these cars can be a real problem or a real balancing act. With the engine and with the internal combustion engine and the power unit in general, we can generally open up the air intakes a little bit. Sometimes you'll see teams during a weekend, particularly if ambient temperatures are high, starting to have to cut exit holes in bodywork just to allow as much airflow through the car as they possibly can. Brakes are a real challenge though, because brake temperatures, there are some incredibly high or heavy braking zones. That at the end of that long straight into turn 1, where you're doing over 220 miles an hour, you then have to stamp on the brakes at incredible levels and slow the car right down for a reasonably slow right-hander of turn 1. Brake temperatures can reach over 1200 degrees C, and that is the same sort of temperature that molten lava flows at. It's incredible, and to try and keep that cooled is a real balancing act with the limited amount of airflow that you have, as I say. So keeping an eye on brake temperatures is critical. You may well see teams towards the end of a race, again if it's high ambient temperatures, having to really manage brake temperatures at different times. We have got the softest 3 tyres in the range here. Never had, of course, the Hypersoft around this track. Because of the speeds, it might be interesting to see how the Hypersoft deals with that. These are softer tyres, a step softer, I guess, than we had at this particular racetrack last year, but the way teams manage tyres now is much more advanced, and therefore degradation levels are much lower, I think, than last year. It's a low deg track anyway, with the surface being very smooth, not one of the highest stress level circuits on tyres. So it will tend to favour a one-stop strategy. The other reason it really favours a one-stop strategy here is the pit lane is very long. So the pit lane loss time, the time it takes you to leave the racetrack, get into the pits and get back into the racetrack, is longer than at some other circuits, and that will always mean that teams will want to do less pit stops. They will always want to favour a one-stop here if they can. That's what I think is highly likely. The top teams probably qualifying on the the ultra soft tyre, perhaps then switching to a super soft halfway through the race to get to the end. That might be the favoured strategy. You may get some teams being able to do a one-stop using the Hypersoft tyre, but it's a bit of an unknown. One thing we do know is that Hypersoft tyre is highly likely to mean we are going to see circuit lap records absolutely smashed, particularly in qualifying on Saturday when we put that on. That has got to be about it for that side of it. Oh, the other thing is there is definitely rain forecast in the air for this weekend. So a little bit like Austin, we might get Friday practice interrupted or less reliable data from Friday practice, and just maybe that'll go some way to spicing up the race just a little bit. We shall see. Right, enjoy the Mexican GP weekend. I hope it's going to be a fantastic one. I can't wait. Highly likely, of course, as well, to see Lewis finally wrap up this 5th world title. So that will be something to celebrate if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan. Right, let's show you what's in the bag. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's video. It was a great fun to make. Lusty's a great character. He's also a brilliant, brilliant airbrush artist. And when he presented this to me the other day, I was blown away by seeing the final finished result. It's unbelievable. Check this out. Look at that. I gave him total free rein on what to do. I didn't guide him at all. I said, look, you're good at this. Just do whatever you want to do. And he's created this amazing character on a skateboard, on a racetrack, a little microphone in hand. I mean, he's just brilliant. I love it. And, let's see, a little nod to my time at McLaren with that sort of iconic McLaren grey, silver and red at the front that we all loved so much. So there it is. If you ever need any airbrush artwork doing on anything, check him out. Go and see him at chaos_artist on Instagram. He's got a great Instagram grid. Go and have a look at it. Thank you, Lusty. It was an absolute pleasure, and this will bring me an awful lot of joy. Hope you enjoyed the videos, guys. Do like it, share it around, please. And if you're not subscribed to the channel already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell. You'll get a notification every time another video goes live. But for now, enjoy the Mexican GP weekend, and I'll speak to you soon.